From your perspective, what's going on with this war?
Well, I think that Russia is advancing very well on the ground, especially in the south and in the east of Ukraine. But it's a very problematic situation for Russians right now in Kiev. Um, uh, it is very likely that we are going to see a very long war, and I think that the Kremlin did not expect the West to be so united. They didn't expect that the Ukrainians were so proud to be Ukrainians, that they were so in love with freedom and independence. And this miscalculation is, of course, affecting this war. I think that Mr. Putin really wanted a special operation, even if with 200,000 people displayed on the ground. But this is not a special operation. This is a real war. This is an invasion of another sovereign country. And he had bad intelligence info on his desk. Now, what we are seeing now, according to my sources, is that you know the progression towards Kiev is indeed stalled, but the Russians are uh, conquering a lot of villages and towns in the south, in the Black Sea, and they are probably going to expand this war to Odessa and probably um, to the borders of Ukraine, putting, of course, at risk other countries, and that they want to close the sea, the Black Sea, to the Ukrainians living in Kiev or in Lviv, and the progression in the eastern part of the country and in the south part of the country, of course, is not at um, let's say uh, light speed, but it's happening right now.
Yeah.
They are encircling some cities like Mariupol, and if the south and eastern advances can meet up, uh, the Russians can encircle and cut off the main forces of the Ukrainian army.
Okay. Well, let me ask you a couple of questions along those lines. There are several European leaders that are planning to go to Kiev, and I'm wondering, is that safe?
Well, it's not safe, but it is a very brave act of politicians who are seeing the danger of this situation. It's not strange that the first politicians going there to Kiev are leaders of close countries to Ukraine, because of course we have to keep in mind that we are just at the borders of NATO. The bombing of the Yavoriv base 2 days ago was 15 kilometers from the border of a NATO country. And this is a scary situation right now. And we have to understand what's going to happen in the next few days, few weeks. I guess this is not going to be a short war. We have to work, of course, in the political arena. Diplomacy has to work, but I don't see right now the end of this war.
You have covered a number of wars throughout your career and been on the ground in many of them, and you have seen how, as you've mentioned, these wars progress. This particular one is slowing down, and it's going to grind, and it's going to be very deadly, most likely. Because I've heard that the Russian president, and he said this publicly, that he wants to bring in fighters from Syria. I know that there are fighters from Chechnya coming there, and some of them are particularly are people that we call Kadyrov's men. And I know you follow what they've done very closely. What can you share about what you know about what they're up to?
Well, uh, there are uh, some hundreds of Chechens actually there on the ground. Someone is saying that Kadyrov himself is in Kiev right now. I'm not sure about this. What I saw is that they are closing the distance to Kiev for sure. They're trying to engage the local population, and they are doing a lot of propaganda on some channels on the web. Um, this means that this a relatively small number of soldiers are going to have a big role in what's going to happen to Kiev. The amount of videos, pictures of them uh, playing, of course, quote unquote, the soldiers' duty is staggering. And when Russians do things like this, be sure something is going to happen. Now, what's happened till now? Let me just add this one, JJ, is that they suffered some defeat too from the Ukrainian army in the area in northwest Kiev. So, of course, we have to face, especially as a journalist, different propaganda actions, but um, we have to pay attention to this kind of propaganda also in reading what's going to happen, how the propaganda used as a weapon in this war, especially in this war.
So, speaking of how this propaganda is being used, it's coming straight out of Moscow, out of the Kremlin. We know that Russia has been talking to China and trying to get help for their war and trying to get money and equipment. And we also know that there was a protester, a very brave protester, that went, she crashed basically the state television news broadcast on Russia One. What do you think is the consequence of that? And will that make a difference to people who were blinded by this propaganda?
Well, every single action can help in trying to um break this wall of truth that is in place in Russia. This brave journalist, this brave producer of the network that you were mentioned, is disappeared. We don't have any news from her since last night. Lawyers can get her information, so we are all very worried. But that is Russia. That is Russia's Putin's Russia. Uh, there is another Russia. We saw a lot of arrests in the streets of the main cities of the country. Something like 14,000 people have been arrested. Right now, if you go in public squares in Russia with a blank paper, you're risking to be arrested. So
Mhm.
after by saying this, it's very important what's happening right now in Russia among the public opinion. But let me be very honest about this, JJ. I don't think that will be crucial for this war. What's happening in the cities of Russia? It's very important. It's very inspiring for our feelings, but I don't know if there. I mean, I don't think that this can really have a real effect right now. The real effect is gonna be in few weeks. Russians are suffering from heavy losses on the ground. We are talking about 6,000 people, 6,000 soldiers. Mr. Putin said that they were not sending um, young soldiers there or reservists. Well, that is not true. There are a lot of very young soldiers there. Some of them are dying, turning back home. Uh, Funerals are not so say the Russian authorities doesn't like to see all these funerals.
Yeah.
Uh, And it's but when you have large amount of people dying, turning back home, you have a lot of families crying and protesting for this war.
Yeah, and we
So
know we
when the numbers are going to grow up, and unfortunately, I have to say that they will probably go very up, and there you can see some kind of pressures from the public opinion in Russia.
yeah,
When you lose a son, when you lose a husband,
yeah.
you can risk all the risks of your life in trying to have justice.
Yeah, and we've seen evidence that the Russian government is trying to cover this up because before the war even got started, we saw images of these things. They're called mobile crematoriums that these units were taking into battle with them. And several sources suggested to me that part of the reason for that was because they did not want to have to take bodies back home because they probably knew that this was going to be a bloody war. They probably knew that there were going to be casualties. I'm not sure they knew that there would be as many as there are, but there has been a significant amount of Russian casualties, as you mentioned. And I think that's a part of the reason why they've turned to China. What do you know about what they're trying to get from China?
Well, we know that they ask for weapons, economical support, and even food.
Really?
Now, this is incredible, um, and probably it helps us to understand that we had this image of this Russian army that was all wrong. They didn't have food with them. They have some portable kitchens when they move with the long column of tanks, but it's quite surprising to see Russians asking for food. China is very important in this crisis. Uh, this war, this crisis um, is very important for the future of our lives and for the future of our of our world.
Hmm.
Um, uh, China can be a responsible actor after the COVID-19 crisis. They didn't act very well in the beginning. They they didn't tell anybody in the world what's going to happen, and so they lose some kind of credibility. Now they can conquer back some credibility in playing the role of the savvy the savvy one and trying to get some ideas in the negotiations.
Yeah.
Uh, but I have to say that they can also have the temptation to build up an alliance with Russians and build up another world of 3 billion people um, that don't want to live in democracy and without standards. This will have a cost, of course, and from what I know, United States uh, diplomats and members of the administration uh, were very clear to the Chinese, especially yesterday. Uh, there is a border here. You can't cross this border, otherwise there will be real consequences. But right now it's very important to see what's happening on the ground because, and then if you want, if we have time, I'd like to go back to the negotiations because I don't see right now what can we have from these negotiations. But
Yeah.
it's very important to see what's going to happen to Kiev. I say that after 3 weeks, 4 weeks, it is normal that you need a kind of pause in this war. You need to understand where you are. You need to refit your armor. You need to fix your tanks, fix your planes, resupply your soldiers, and this will take some time. If Kiev will resist in these few days that we have ahead of us, it's going to be a long war. And the
Yeah.
the situation on the ground, of course, um, has a lot of impact on the negotiations.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah. So you said you wanted to talk a little bit more about the future here. Why don't we make that our last question then, and go ahead and share what you can about what you believe.
sorry, I can't hear you, JJ. Can you say it again?
Yeah, you said you had some more you wanted to share about where we're going and where this whole thing is going in negotiations.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to share on that?
The fact is that honestly, I don't see Vladimir Putin giving up. And in a negotiation, you need to have reciprocal trust. And let's remember, Russians denied the will to attack just hours before the invasion began. And what can he ask? Uh, and of course, it's very important what's going on the ground. He said many times, and it was very clear just days before the war began. He thinks Ukraine does not exist. He said that Ukraine is a piece of quote unquote motherland Russia. So again, it's very difficult to understand how to unfold a real negotiation with this um, Putin's ideas. And let's see how the situation is unfolding on the ground. He's trying to reduce Ukraine probably a small part of Galicia and maybe Kiev, I don't know.
Hmm.
Is already trying to replace through assassinations and kidnappings mayors in the south. We saw it in Melitopol, we saw it in another city a little bit eastern, and we see that the people that he put in place there are just saying, "Hey, this is the new reality, people. You have to accept it." I don't see these as steps that can go back with a negotiation. And frankly, I don't know if Putin is um, let's say is still credible to the eyes of the negotiators, whoever they can be.
Yeah, I don't see how they can find him credible if he's bombing and shooting and killing while he
Sure.
has diplomats sitting at the table talking about the possibility of peace. The two just don't match. They don't mix. They don't work together.
Yeah,
Lao
one,
Petrilli. Sorry, go
yeah,
ahead. Go ahead.
yeah, yeah. Sorry, just to tell one thing. One general told me once I was in another involved in another war, and they were doing like Putin is doing right now. They were bombing, and I asked him, how can they bomb if they are negotiating? And they said, well, it's when you negotiate that you bomb more because you want to gain results on the ground, and then it's more difficult to. I mean, you can have this negotiation from a strong point of view, and but this is very different. This is very different, and we all know it. I mean,
Yes.
Putin said very clearly, Ukraine is part of Russia. I want it, and probably, and I saw that the Pentagon too is saying this. Probably is not thinking to take all the country. Well, with these people on the ground, with the West so, let me say, united in saying, no, no, it's not going to happen. We are, I mean, en plein air, they are saying we are sending weapons. We are supporting Ukraine. Yes, we don't, we will not be there on the ground, but when you send all these weapons, it's like if you are on the ground. One thing that surprised Putin was the fact that seems on the ground that the Russians don't know where the Ukrainians are, but the
Mm.
Ukrainians see where the Russians are. This is not magical. This is intelligence, and of course there is the help of the intelligence services of the West that is crucial in this war right now.
Well, Lao Petrilli, thank you for joining us on Global with your expert insight and very good information about what's taking place there in Europe and certainly in Ukraine. And okay, we'll stay in close contact with you as time passes. Thank you again.
Thank you, JJ. My pleasure.